I mean, it's like a broken record, right? A million males out there were utterly caught off guard saying life was fantastic until it wasn't. And I am no exception. I thought everything was fine until it all went wrong. I'm Blake Ramsey. At 31, life seemed pleasant and satisfying. Things were going well, particularly with my position at Space Conquest, a division of a major aerospace company. We were working on a major project to build a next-generation manned spacecraft that would look like an airliner when it landed and would only carry passengers. My responsibilities included building the escape system and ensuring that each crew member had their own capsule to evacuate from in case of an emergency. A space engineer's dream has come true. My wife Tracy and I were married for 7 years and had 3 children, Tyler, 7, and twin daughters, Elizabeth and Emily, 6. Family was my top priority, balancing work and quality time. Our parents lived nearby and enjoyed indulging their grandchildren. Tracy's sister, Lucy, was also close. We lived in a friendly neighborhood in a 4-bedroom house with plans to convert the basement into additional space as the kids grew. Tracy and I met in college, fell in love, and married shortly thereafter. I studied aerospace engineering while Tracy worked as a legal assistant. She quit her job after Tyler was born, but returned after the twins were born. Tracy's behavior altered once the girls entered school, indicating difficulties in our relationship that I had overlooked. Before everything went wrong, I met Tracy's employer, Stanley Cross, at a couple social gatherings including the office Christmas party. I did not like him. He came across as arrogant and unpleasant, and I didn't trust him at all. Whenever I visited Tracy at work, Cross appeared possessive and unwilling to let her go. I kept an eye out for any signals of romance between them, but I saw nothing at the moment. Things came apart when the twins graduated kindergarten after being dropped off at my parents' house for the weekend. I hoped for some quality time alone with Tracy to work on our relationship. When I arrived home, she was dressed to the nines, looking stunning in a short black dress, high heels, and flawless makeup. "Wow, you look beautiful, babe. If you'd told me we were going out, I'd have rushed home. Let me freshen up and change, and I'll be ready to go. So where are we heading?" Tracy smirked, which was not a good indication. "Well, we are not going anyplace together. But I'm stepping out, simply not with you." I was stunned. "Wait, what do you mean?" "I have a date with my employer, Stanley Cross, and this is only the beginning. There will be some new rules in effect starting now. Stans is picking me up for a night out, so I won't be home tonight or tomorrow. We have a room downtown. I will be returning Sunday afternoon." "What the hell are you talking about?" I shouted. "You need to relax and accept it. This is how it will be. I'm heading out, but I'll return Sunday afternoon. If you walk out the door, don't even bother returning back." "No, Blake, I will be back. We're still married, and I still come home, but you have to comprehend. I need more. If you make this difficult, you will be the one who leaves. It would be a shame for our children to see their father broke and in jail. Now sit down and let me tell you about the changes. Let's do it the simple way before Stan arrives in about 30 minutes. You will not be pleased if he has to explain. If that a-hole shows there in 30 minutes, he will leave with a broken nose in 31. Do not do that, Blake." Tracy spoke firmly for 2 reasons. First, you should know what he can do if you don't cooperate. Second, he will have Max with him. Max is his bodyguard and you don't want to mess with him. Touch Stan and you'll wind up in the hospital. I had not felt this thrill since I was a Marine in the Middle East. At first, I couldn't pinpoint anything, but then it struck me. I am being ambushed, with my wife on one side and Stanley Cross poised to enter the fray. I am trapped in the center. They have the upper hand due to their pre-planning and surprise, and I don't know how to defend myself. I brushed past Tracy and went upstairs. "Where are you going?" Tracy demanded. "We need to talk. I'm going to freshen up quickly. Be down in 5. During my stay in the Middle East, I was ambushed 3 times. I had some guidelines for dealing with ambushes. First, try to spot it before getting captured, but with Tracy and Stanley, I didn't expect it. Second, find cover quickly. That is why I was heading straight toward my bedroom. And the third rule, create an escape strategy for yourself and your team. I needed a plan, so I created one. First, I changed from my suit to something more casual. Then I set my iPhone to record and put it in my pocket. Next, I went to my wardrobe and searched through my old footlocker. On top, a key was taped to the back. I opened it, and memories surged back when I saw my old uniforms. I found I could still fit into them 5 years later. Under the uniforms, I discovered a stack of filing folders and a box containing my medals and prizes for service over 2 tours in the Middle East. I quickly glanced at the medals, but they weren't what I was looking for. I found what I was seeking for beneath them. My Marine Corps Beretta 9mm Betsy. It was stored in a cloth-lined plastic pouch with 2 bullet clips. Technically, I wasn't intended to have my pistol, but due to a mix-up when I was leaving, the service let me keep it. This tool meant a great deal to me. It had saved my life more times than I could count during warfare. As I was loading a clip, Tracy called from downstairs. "Blake, get down here quickly or you'll regret it. I will be right down." "Can you get me a beer?" I called back. I tucked the tool into my belt toward the small of my back and covered it with my shirt. It was a double-action semi-automatic pistol, so all I had to do was pull the trigger to fire, unless someone was looking. They would not notice it. Before leaving the bedroom, I took out my phone, began filming, and then put it back into my pocket, the camera peeking out. I wanted to know exactly what Tracy and her employer had planned for me, so I decided to employ some of the interrogation techniques I'd learned in the Marine Corps. I intend to remain cool and urged Tracy to discuss how she observed things. When I entered the living room, Tracy was sitting at the table with a glass of wine in front of her and a beer waiting for me. "It was about time," she stated angrily. "We had some things to do before Stan arrived." "Tracy, I see you have something on your mind," I said. "Tell me about the new circumstance that I'm required to accept. First and foremost, remember that I adore you above all else. We have a family together, and I want to grow old beside you. I sincerely do not want to hurt you, honey," she began. But I interrupted. "Tracy, no more sweet words. I am not your honey or sweetheart. Please call me Blake and I will call you Tracy. Tracy." She appeared offended by my lack of affection, but she persisted. "Look, I do not want to harm you, but things have changed as of tonight and you must accept them, or else. Stan and I have been very close since he made me his personal assistant. I mean, we're having an affair. It has been going on for over 7 months now. He started flirting with me shortly after I returned to work as a secretary. When he elevated me to executive secretary, we began drinking coffee together during our breaks. We began spending more time together, and his flirtation evolved into seduction. It was flattering to have such a powerful man interested in me. One evening after work, he made his move in his office. He grabbed me, kissed my neck, and the situation progressed from there. He's attractive, pleasant, and fit. It was difficult to resist. We ended up on his couch, and he was an experienced lover. I enjoyed it so much that I didn't want to quit. "So you didn't consider the consequences of being unfaithful to me?" I said. "I apologize, Blake, but I didn't. However, this does not imply that I do not love you. You are still the man I want to be with forever." I sipped my beer and muttered, "Good luck making that happen." "Tell me, Tracy." I pressed on why, after 7 months of hiding around, you are suddenly coming clean. You could have kept it going indefinitely, right below my nose. Until now, Blake. We have been keeping things under wraps, meeting in Stan's office, limo, and daytime hotel rooms. But we're tired of the secrecy. We want to be transparent about our relationship. This includes spending evenings together, going out in public, and traveling as a couple. However, we need you to support our way of life. I took another sip of my beer and said, "Well, good luck with that." "No, Blake." Tracy leaned close and tried to hold my hands. "We aren't getting divorced. We are staying married. You simply have to accept that Stan and I will spend a lot of time together. I'll be staying with him overnight a few times a week. We'll take weekend getaways, and I may even accompany him on longer travels to Europe or the Caribbean. And as his personal assistant, I'll get to travel with him, meet important people, and accompany him to business meetings and social functions. Stan's pays me nicely. It will be beneficial for us. Think about the perks. Assume the vacations are the kids' college funding. We're finally finishing up the lake cabin like we've always wanted," I shot back. "Do you honestly think I'd want any of that? Paid for through Stanley's company? 403. I am not 403. Tracy snapped back, her voice filled with rage. "I'm a key member of the company. Stan relies on me to operate his legal practice. Closeness is simply one aspect of the deal. When you are with a powerful man like him, I am honored that he would choose me as his mistress. You should be too. And let's be honest, this fling is unlikely to last forever. I would estimate that it will run its course in 2 or 3 years, then everything will return to its previous state. I'll be your loving wife again, and I'll enjoy our family for the next 50 years. So here's the thing. Stan wants to be friends with you. He believes we can share me so long as he gets what he wants, and you follow his rules. He knows I still love you and want to be personal with you. He even suggested you have your moments with me. There will just be a few conditions because he will be visiting our home. Sometimes he wishes to be a member of the family, maybe even like an uncle to our children. Internally, I was boiling with rage, but I maintained my cool externally, vowing that a-hole would never look at or speak to my children. Ever. I get it. Then it hit me. Why does that a-hole want to be engaged with my family? Doesn't he have his own Stans, married to a younger woman from a wealthy family? Tracy revealed that their marriage is primarily about convenience. Unfortunately, she cannot have children. Perhaps he should adopt and remain out of other people's lives. I explained that Stan wants his own children, particularly a son, to carry on his legacy. Tracy said that he would also settle for a daughter. Ideally, he wants one of each. Why isn't that a-hole using a surrogate? Then he could have as many kids as he wanted. I suggested he think about it, but he's concerned he won't be a good father. He wants any child. He needs to grow up in a caring family. Tracy explained. Tracy then looked down. God, here we go. I said. Tracy's purpose is to make you feel even more furious. Hit me. Then it struck me. He wants to make you pregnant, doesn't he? And then he wants me to raise his child. It would not be his child alone, Tracy insisted. It would be mine too. And you'd enjoy it because you adore me. And the child's last name would be Cross. Stan would pay us a lot of money to raise his child and cover all of their bills until they graduated from college. Crap. Are you already expecting? I blurted out. No, she responded. However, he wants me to quit taking the medication in a few months. I told him that I wanted you to agree to our new arrangement first, just when I thought things couldn't get worse. I whispered to myself once more. I made it plain. Good luck with it. Tracy was angry. Stop saying it. She snapped. Blake, I know you're not on board right now, but maybe you'll come around. Her words struck me hard as I rose to confront her. The doorbell rang. Tracy hastened to respond, inviting her employer in. As he went in, he grabbed her waist and kissed her. This keeps getting better, I murmured to myself. How did he respond? Cross inquired of Tracy. Not good. You might need to spell out the consequences if he doesn't cooperate, she said. I overheard him say, then we'll proceed to plan B. Shock and awe. Stan was a huge man, taller and heavier than me at 511. I couldn't understand what Tracy saw in him. Perhaps his long graying hair gave him a distinguished appearance. He appeared confident in his black suit and had a strong presence. He stepped right close to me and invaded my personal space. Mr. Ramsey, we need to discuss, he explained. Talk. I will kill you, I shot back. You could try, but my driver will definitely stop you before you get too far. By nightfall, you would be in jail, so sit down. He placed an order. I looked out the door and saw a large man waiting on my doorway. I was not afraid, but I wanted to hear him out, so I grudgingly sat down. Good. Now we can chat like adults. Your wife's appointment as my personal assistant came with certain additional responsibilities. Yes, I am talking about proximity. I've been with your wife for 6 months now, but we're weary of sneaking around. You and Tracy will have a new arrangement as my assistants. She will take care of my professional and personal demands. Mr. Ramsey, you will still be Tracy's spouse. Your position as a father will not change, except one item. I'll be looking after Tracy's requirements. Most of the time, this will occur at a hotel or my business. But sometimes, while you're not present, we may use your bed, your hole. Why should I put up with this? I'd rather divorce her for infidelity, I spit back. Mr. Ramsey, that type of discourse will not help. Remember who I am. I'm a prominent lawyer at the city's top legal firm. If you try to divorce her, you will have to pay. And not only in court, we will steal everything from you. Make sure you pay alimony and child support while she is still with me, your sons and daughters. You won't see them often, if at all. You will be charged with a child-related offense. Go to jail and you'll lose custody forever. You've lost your job, your family and friends. They will turn their back on you. I sat there in shock, speechless. I never expected Tracy and this a-hole would go so far with their romance. Stan moved on. Now I know you're not going to do anything dumb. You'll regret telling my wife. My driver and his cronies will make certain of that. If you try to flee town, my investigators will locate you. So simply accept the new offer. Your wife is an excellent assistance." He leaned forward, and she has a fairly good mouth, too. I turned to Tracy. "Would you truly do that to me?" "I hope not, Blake. But if you cooperate, I won't have to. You'll eventually get used to it and think it's normal." She spoke quietly, still reeling. I saw them walk out the door, but I had something to say to them first. "Wait, I have something you should know." The jerk rolled his eyes, clearly annoyed. "What is it? Make it snappy." I took a breath. I had a few drinks and lamented my marriage. "I'm calling your wife to tell her everything." Turning to Tracy, I added, "After that, I'm calling your sister Lucy to spill the beans, and I'll let her break the news to your parents." Stan appeared perplexed, not used to encountering resistance when attempting to strong-arm someone. "What was that?" he questioned. Without repeating myself, I left bright and early on Saturday. "I'm hiring a locksmith to change all of the locks." Tracy was now paying close attention, attempting to understand the situation. "After the locks are changed, I'm going to Kate's apartment down the street. She's been brazenly flirting with me since her husband died a few months ago. She's older than you and not a supermodel, but she's got an amazing physique. She even modeled a bikini for me once. Until an hour ago, I would not have considered seeing anyone else. But do things change?" Tracy appeared hurt and stammered. "Blake, you cannot do that," I went on. "When you return Sunday, you will discover Tracy's belongings in the front yard. Every single part of it. Clothes, shoes, cosmetics, jewelry, and even the wedding book. And no, not in trash bags. Better hurry and pick them up before the sprinklers go off at 4 a.m. Monday." Stan's temper was rising. His face became scarlet, and his fists clenched as he realized his threats were meaningless. Tracy appeared pained. I added one more thing before wrapping up. "On Monday, I'll meet with a divorce lawyer who will file for divorce on the basis of cheating, identifying you, Stanley, as a co-conspirator. In addition, we plan to sue you for interfering with our marriage and your organization for violating corporate policies, assuming a large organization like yours has any. Even if the cases are unsuccessful, they will damage your reputation." Stanley, the jerk, was furious. He tossed the overnight bag at the wall and marched toward me, invading my personal space once more. He stabbed my chest sharply with 2 fingers. I had to actually stop myself from punching back. "Listen, you idiot," he began. "You have no idea who you're fooling with or how brutal I can be when I want to ruin someone. I am Stanley Cross. I operate the area's largest law company. I could legally break you up in no time. By the time Tracy and I walk into our hotel, you'll be handcuffed for a variety of offenses. You might believe you can fight back if you are innocent. You cannot. I've been practicing law in this state for 30 years. I know the majority of the top cops personally, and I'm friends with a number of lawyers in the DA's office. Heck, I've even slept with some. The majority of the judges in this city either owe me a large favor or are aware that I have dirt on them. Even politicians owe me since I helped them get elected in one way or another. Stanley was going on a rampage, and I didn't want to interrupt. If you go out with your friend Kate tomorrow, the cops will stop you and search your car. They're probably going to find pills. The Vice Squad will then receive a tip concerning offensive videos involving kids on your computer. And that's only the beginning. How long and expensive do you think it will be to fight all of this? You will not find a lawyer who is brave enough to challenge me. You will be ruined. Meanwhile, I'll still be with your wife. Got it? 4, I believe whatever you say. Jerk. Stanley turned to face me again. You should show me some respect. Call me Sir or Mr. Cross. Call me a hole. One more time, Max will teach you some manners. When he stated this, he slapped me again with his right hand to emphasize his point. The second time, I grabbed his hand with my left and snapped all of his fingers backward, bringing them to his wrist. And I held them there. Cross got caught off guard. For a time, he appeared astonished, staring at his hand in amazement. Then the pain struck, and he let out a loud shout. I shoved him away and he fell onto the couch. Tracy raced to his side to assist. He spread his fingers, clutched his flattened palm to his chest, and rocked back and forth in agony. "You're a cursed bastard! You're going to regret this! I will make you pay!" he shouted when he remembered his security who was waiting outside. "Max, get in here!" Max entered through the front door, which swung open. He was enormous, resembling a tough guy from an old 1940s film, exuding strength. "Yes, Mr. Cross," Max acknowledged. Cross motioned to me with his unharmed hand and issued a command. "Take care of him, Max." "Yes, Mr. Cross." Max responded by strolling across the living room toward me. Tracy tried to object, but Cross shrugged it away. When Tracy stated that Cross would be bringing his bodyguard, I expected this type of encounter. I was aware that I would encounter some tough treatment. This was going to be difficult, though. Few people are aware that I was a prisoner of war. It barely lasted 17 days, but it was enough to win me the Prisoner of War medal. During my captivity, I was the only American they could get their hands on, and they turned their wrath on me. But I did learn something. I can withstand offense. The actual torture was hanging from a beam in my cell. My arms were dragged painfully tight behind me. The suffering was awful and unending, so in comparison, taking a beating was easy. I stood firm, providing no opposition as Max swung his enormous hand. His hit landed squarely on my nose, sending me falling into the coffee table. Max was dazed and plainly damaged, and I could see him hesitating about continuing. He looked across for guidance. "Hurt him, Max, hurt him severely. Cross-ordering occurs." Max grabbed me by the hair, lifted me up, and delivered another blow. This time it was in my left eye. I collapsed again, my vision blurring as I realized I couldn't go much further without losing consciousness. I said something to Max. "You hit like a chick." His pride has been bruised. Max gripped my hair again, ready for another strike. However, when I shot him in the foot, he was caught off guard. This stunned everyone in the room. Max recoiled in horror, stumbling backward till he fell into my favorite leather chair. Meanwhile, I collapsed to the ground as Max groped for his own tool. I warned him, "Do not do it, Max!" When he disregarded my warning and grabbed for his tool, I fired again. He dropped his instrument, screaming in agony. I crept over, disarmed him, and asked, "How many men have you killed, Max?" He felt the heat against his temple. Max shook his head, indicating that he had never removed someone. I told him that I'd killed 27 men, all soldiers fighting for their convictions. Then I asked, "How much respect do you think I have for you?" Max shook his head side to side once more. "That's correct, Max." "None," I said. "So there isn't much reason why I shouldn't offer you something, is there?" Max pleaded. "I have a family," I replied. "Well, Max, I have a family too, and you didn't appear to care about mine. Perhaps your family would be better off if you left. Please." I noticed he begging while looking over Max's shoulder. "I shot you right in the shoulder. Join Max. You'll bleed out if I don't get you to a doctor within an hour or so, but do not worry. These orthopedic doctors can fix anything with their plastic and ceramic replacement bones. You might need to learn to use your left hand for certain tasks, such as eating, writing, or shooting. However, you will most likely experience mobility limitations with that arm for the rest of your life. And if you ever feel agony in that arm again, remember me. And if I ever see you again, I'll presume you're trying to hurt me. I will not hesitate to complete. Have you got it?" Max nodded in understanding. I pushed his shoulder forward to examine the wound. Max Winston. Pain. "Damn, Max," I mourned. "The bullet went straight through your shoulder. And my favorite chair. You're bleeding all over it. I'm not sure if I can clean it up or mend the hole. If I have to replace the chair, I will be even more upset than I am now." Playing with Max for so long was a mistake. Leaving an adversary behind me was a greater deal. Tracy's warning brought me back to reality. "Blake, be careful." I turned just in time to see Cross hurl a fireplace poker at my head. Luckily, my arm blocked the majority of the hit, but it shattered my forearm and knocked my tool away. Cross lunged for it, but I punched him squarely in the groin. He collapsed to the ground in anguish. I took my 9mm Mimi and pinned him down. "Open your mouth." I placed an order. Cross declined to comply. He tightened his lips and shook his head, expressing resistance. So I struck hard, resulting in a deep cut on his lip. His mouth opened and I pushed the object down his throat, making it difficult for him to breathe. "How's that for my version of shock and awe?" I mocked. "If you heard what I told Max, you'd know. I have officially destroyed 27 soldiers in combat. 7 of them were killed with this Magnum. And before you start objecting, remember that this gadget only requires 4 ounces of pressure on the trigger. And I already have 2 ounces. I warned him with that cross, and he is now struggling. "Where is your cell phone?" I demanded. Cross indicated that it was in his left breast pocket. I retrieved it. "Turn it on." I placed an order using his fingerprint. "The phone is Cross-powered. Now call your wife on FaceTime," I told Cross. His eyes widened as he complied. After a few rings, a woman answered. "Stanley, why are you phoning me at this hour? So who is this?" the woman questioned. I was alarmed to see a red face. "Didn't she recognize Mrs. Cross?" I began. "My name is Blake Ramsey. You may not recognize my name, but you are most likely familiar with my wife, Tracy Ramsey. She serves as your husband's personal assistant." Mrs. Cross acknowledged. "I know Tracy. What's happening? Why are you hurt? And where is my husband?" "Mrs. Cross, I'm holding your husband down with a tool in his mouth," I revealed, angling the phone to show her the cross on his face. "My God," she gasped. "Please do not damage him. Listen, Mrs. Cross, time is short. Your husband and my wife have had an affair for several months. They had planned to spend the weekend in a motel. When I resisted, your husband ordered his goons to beat me. Unfortunately, I had to shoot him. And now your husband is next." I informed her that my husband was supposed to be in Palm Springs working on a case, Mrs. Cross stated. "Mrs. Cross, he's right here on my floor. Come meet my wife, Tracy." I showed her Tracy looking terrified on the sofa. "As you can see, my wife is dressed up and ready for a night out with your husband," I pointed out. "This is unbelievable." Mrs. Cross reacted. "I was astonished," I added. "I've got to go." "Mrs. Cross, the cops are on their way. Nice conversation. I ended the call back to you. Your wife has a hint now. What were your plans?" "Send Max and his cronies to rough me up," I questioned, looking at Max. "Max needs some time off," I mentioned. I warned him. "Send anyone. I'll offer them. Then come for you. I get it." Cross nodded, and I withdrew it. I suddenly smelled something awful. "Did you poop yourself?" I chuckled. "I now need a new carpet." "Tracy, pass me my briefcase," I requested. She handed it to me, and I brought out my laptop. "Was this your stash?" I asked, pointing to the laptop's hard drive. Cross was screaming and covering his ear, most likely from a perforated eardrum. I leaned near to his ear and muttered, "Good luck with that computer now, a-hole." Then I got off Cross and instructed him to sit on the couch. He obeyed while gripping his groin and ear. I told Tracy to get a wet cloth from the kitchen and aid Max with his injured shoulder. She ran to fetch it and returned promptly to help Max. After that, I told everyone to stay there while I went to clean up the kitchen. My phone is still filming. I realized I needed to hide it to keep the cops from deleting the film because Cross had connections. I tucked it away in a drawer with a bunch of dish towels. I then wiped my face with a wet cloth. When I returned to the living room, everyone remained in place. Cross was experiencing agony. Tracy is helping Max. I instructed them to wait for the cops, who would arrive soon with an ambulance. Outside, my neighbors had heard the noises. I confirmed it by asking if anyone had contacted 911. One of my neighbors was former Marine Colonel Orson Sage. We were close friends and frequently shared a beer. He spoke to me as Captain, whereas I addressed him as Colonel. "Are you all right, Captain?" the Colonel inquired. I said, "I have seen better days." Sirens blasted in the distance, heralding the police's impending approach. "Colonel," I called, "can you help me?" "Sure thing, Captain," he said, stepping onto my doorstep first. "Can you help me unpack these magnums and place them on the table? I don't want to be carrying one when the cops arrive." The Colonel snatched it and swiftly ensured their safety. Then he put them on the patio table. Kate, a widowed neighbor from up the street, saw my injuries and came over to aid. I turned to the Colonel and Kate and said, "I wish I could explain everything, but time is short. My wife's boyfriend, a lawyer, threatened to frame me using pharmaceuticals. I gave the Colonel my keys. After all of this, if the garage isn't taped off, I'll hide my car. The garage code represents our street address." "Got it, Captain?" he responded. Kate interjected, "Blake, you look really rough." "My head is throbbing and I feel dizzy," I admitted. I guess I took a harder impact than I expected. I was sitting on the front steps with Kate when 2 police cars arrived. Lights flashing and sirens blasting. They approached warily, hands on their tools, but the Colonel assured them there was no danger. Pointing at the unpacked tools on the porch, I told them about the 3 people inside. A police officer spotted my situation and commented, "Looks like you need some medical attention too soon." Ambulances arrived, lights flashing and sirens blasting. Emergency personnel rushed to the porch as another officer notified them about the injured guy inside. As my disorientation intensified, Kate advised me to lie down while an EMT examined my face. I discussed my possible broken forearm. Later, in a blur, I noticed Max being brought out on a stretcher and Cross being assisted into an ambulance. Tracy, accompanied by a female officer, came to a halt nearby, sobbing and apologizing loudly. But I rejected her, telling her, "Go to hell, Tracy." Before she was carried away, I either passed out or obtained pain relief, staying unconscious for 3 days. When I awoke, a nurse named Rose greeted me warmly. I am alone in the room. I inspected my injuries, which included a cast on my right forearm and gauze and tape covering my left eye and nose. Aside from that, I appeared fine, connected to various machines. Dr. York kept me sedated for a probable minor concussion, allowing me to sleep until the morning. I awoke to discover my left wrist chained to the bed rail. Detective Sergeant Hartman indicated that I was being arrested on many offenses, including offense and magnum use. He added that my wife and 2 others had filed a complaint. Rose verified her knowledge of the situation after he had left. Dr. York assured me that I would heal and informed me that I had been transferred to a new ward. A few days later, Sam Wilton, a lawyer, came to see me and suggested that I plead guilty in order to negotiate with the district attorney. I maintained on my innocence and inquired about my children, who were with my wife's sister. I could not believe how quickly my life had altered. I'm worried about my shattered marriage, my children, and my career. I gave Sam my company's contact information and asked him to alert my employer about the problem. After examining the charges against me, I inquired about the spousal offense charge indicated by Detective Sergeant Hartman. Sam clarified that Stanley Cross had included it in his complaint, which alleges many instances of assault against Tracy and is corroborated by photographic evidence of her injuries. Despite my denial of the claims, Sam advised that we pursue a plea offer at the arraignment to perhaps reduce the severity of the charges. However, I expressed worry about admitting guilt. Fearing civil ramifications from the witnesses involved in the looming court struggle, I asked Sam to contact my uncle, Jonathan Allen Carter, a retired Navy lawyer known for his skill in family law. I underlined the importance of caution because I didn't want Sam and Uncle Jack to find out about my plans too soon. It was decided that he would offer legal aid. Sam informed me that Uncle Jack stressed the significance of keeping confidentiality about the case, specifics. During the hospital TV arraignment, I pleaded not guilty to all charges, despite the prosecution's request for no bail. The court decided to put me in the hospital for 2 more days before conducting a hearing to determine if I would stand trial. Uncle Jack visited me the day before I went to jail. He was now legally my lawyer and could pay me a visit. Seeing him was a tremendous relief. I hugged him, feeling emotional. I hadn't understood how much help I needed until then. After catching up, Uncle Jack became serious. He wanted to speak with me alone and fill me in on certain information. He had spoken briefly with Lucy and told me that the kids were fine with her till things settled. Lucy was perplexed by Tracy's account of events and pleased that Uncle Jack was there for me. Uncle Jack then inquired as to how I had gotten into this mess. I told him everything that happened. He found it unbelievable. I also informed him about the other story. Stanley Cross, Max Angel, and Tracy had devised a plan following my detention. In quiet tones, I told Uncle Jack that I had everything on camera with my iPhone hidden at home. He didn't exhibit any emotion. I was relieved knowing there might be proof to back up my story. Uncle Jack pledged to help me during this experience. He suggested my primary focus should be on recovery while he worked on my case and investigated bail options. I agreed and asked him to keep an eye on my children. He pledged to stay in touch with Lucy. After leaving the hospital, I was hauled to jail. Uncle Jack remained silent for 3 days. Finally, I appeared before a judge with Uncle Jack there. He battled for my bail, but I was ultimately placed under house arrest. Uncle Jack had arranged for me to remain in a gated neighborhood with him. However, I was unable to leave the area. Uncle Jack had ideas in the works, but he kept most of them a secret until they were carried out. He hired private detectives to assist him and assigned them to work on different leads. Retrieving my phone from my kitchen drawer was difficult because the restraining order prevented me from entering my home. Uncle Jack declined to break in, hoping that a solution would emerge. In the interim, he set up a new cell phone account for both of us to communicate. I contacted my neighbor, the Colonel, to give him an update on my predicament. He informed me about activity at my house. Uncle Jack proposed that the Colonel come over for drinks and barbecued steaks to discuss more. The Colonel described an incident he witnessed shortly after the altercation. He saw someone near my garage, contacted 911, and confronted them with an aluminum bat. Despite the threats, they departed in a black SUV. Their faces were recorded in a photograph. Shortly after Tracy arrived home, the Colonel noticed her speaking with men near the garage, noting the SUV's license plate. Uncle Jack looked into the license plate that was linked to Unique Services, a private investigation agency controlled by Jose Gonzalez and Miguel Ortega, both of whom had questionable law enforcement credentials. Stanley Cross's law practice provided notable and distinctive services among its clientele. It got vital for me to retrieve my cell phone from my kitchen. Uncle Jack planned to meet with Tracy at 6 p.m. under the guise of mediation, accompanied by her lawyer's associate. Tracy embraced Uncle Jack cordially as he arrived, and Gordon Merritt from Cross's law office joined them. Following introductions, everyone gathered in the family room to discuss problems. Uncle Jack expressed regret and questioned my account of events while we were both recording the talk. He went on to describe my accusation that Tracy and Mr. Cross were having an affair, as well as how angry I was when I saw them together. Mr. Merritt interrupted, implying that the evidence was stacked against me. Uncle Jack then suggested that Mr. Merritt testify that I may not have been in the proper frame of mind during the incident. Given that I thought Mr. Cross was taking Tracy away, he emphasized my previous positive behavior as a husband and father. After thinking about it, Mr. Merritt suggested that they consider such a proposal. "If I plead guilty to the charges against me," Uncle Jack inquired, "are you suggesting all of the charges, or are there any chances of some being reduced or dropped?" "I'll need to speak with Mr. Cross. He wields considerable power in the district attorney's office. Perhaps we can find a method to make this go away. It's not just for Mr. Ramsey's sake. Getting embroiled in a high-profile legal problem isn't good for Mr. Cross either. It harmed his reputation and business. That's all I have to say, Tracy. Thank you for meeting with me. Blake wants you to inform the kids that he misses and loves them." Tracy appeared moved, and her eyes welled up with tears before Uncle Jack turned off his recorder. He added, "If I can prove Blake's story, you could face charges such as perjury and obstruction of justice, both of which carry jail time." Just as Gordon Merritt was about to speak, Uncle Jack turned to face him. "And you, counselor? If I can prove that you knew your client and Mr. Cross were lying, you could face legal penalties. Before you answer, talk about it with each other." Uncle Jack grabbed his recorder and stood up while you spoke. "Mind if I get some water?" "No, go ahead, Uncle Jack. The kitchen is that way." Tracy motioned toward the dining room entrance. "Ice water is available in the kitchen refrigerator." Uncle Jack made sure he couldn't be spotted. Then I found my iPhone in a drawer near the sink. After pocketing it, he poured himself some cold water from the refrigerator. After a few minutes, he returned to the family room. "Tracy, do you have anything to add before I go?" Tracy looked anxiously at Gordon Merritt, who spoke out for her. "We have nothing else to add at this time, Mr. Carter, and we'll keep you updated on any modifications to Mr. Ramsey's accusations. And we anticipate your help if you wish to resolve this issue." Uncle Jack concluded that was fair enough. "Thank you for meeting with me, Tracy. Mr. Merritt, I will see you in court." Uncle Jack did not bring his iPhone to the townhouse. Instead, he arranged for Digital Analysis Solutions, DHS, to investigate its contents. He informed the DHS director on the case's background and the significance of the video-audio recording to my defense. DHS assured Uncle Jack that they would treat it properly and promised to deliver an analysis a few days later. Uncle Jack and I went to the DA's office for their report. DHS moved everything from my iPhone to their server. They discovered the film and created many backups on DVDs, flash drives, and on the cloud to ensure its safekeeping. Uncle Jack and I saw the video together for the first time. It documented all of Tracy Cross's chats with me. However, sections of the offense took place during Max's attack. It was evident that I was defending myself. Some areas were visually confusing, but the audio gave a clear image of what happened. Fortunately, it also showed Max pulling out his magnum against me. We believed the meeting was over, But the DHS director revealed that my phone included more than just images, contacts, emails, and texts. There were 97 new emails and 64 SMS messages that I hadn't seen. DAS examined them without opening them, and the majority were legitimate from friends and relatives, but one was suspicious, containing 27 images of children. If I had opened it, those photos would have ended up on my phone after I destroyed my PC. I told Cross he couldn't plant such pictures there, so he attempted it on my phone. Uncle Jack and I thanked DHS for their assistance and left my phone with them. We took copies of the video home. Later, Uncle Jack became thoughtful. "What is on your mind, Uncle Jack?" I asked. He said, "I'm thinking about our next move. We could show this to the district attorney now and most likely get the charges against you dropped. Plus Cross. Max and Tracy may face some heat, but if Cross has the pull, we believe the whole thing will vanish. What are our alternative options?" I wondered introspectively. Uncle Jack replied, "We could wait till the hearing. The prosecutor would most likely call all of the conspirators to testify, after which we could present our case. The prosecutor would have to pursue them for conspiracy, lying on oath, and other offenses. They'd be looking at some real jail time, and I'd have a chance to get my kids back," I reflected. "So what is your call? We could end this fast or drag them through a protracted trial implicating them all in a grand plot," he said. "I'm all in on pulling them down," I decided without hesitation. I was hoping Blake would say that. I've always wanted to expose them publicly and defeat them in court. Uncle Jack admitted, "Just like Perry Mason." It amused me that even a seasoned lawyer like Uncle Jack had some whimsical goals. We waited for the hearings, which were planned for 3 weeks, while Uncle Jack assiduously prepared his case. He warned us not to expose our trump card, the video, too soon in order to avoid the prosecution from suppressing it. So we kept it quiet until a week before the hearing. Uncle Jack returned to San Francisco for other obligations. During his absence, I received a call from the gatehouse guard alerting me that Tracy Ramsey had claimed to be my wife after visiting Uncle Jack, who encouraged me to stay calm and respectful. As I waited for Tracy, I invited her in despite my awareness of her toxic nature. I cleaned up the townhouse, then greeted Tracy at the door. Despite my worries, I couldn't help but admire her effort and appearance in a chic suit with modest makeup. "Come in, Tracy," I welcomed. "You look great." "Thanks, Blake," she replied. "You appear quite fit and handsome. I've been using the exercise facility here on a regular basis," I explained. "And I've been watching what I eat, generally focusing on fruits and vegetables and avoiding junk," I continued. "Please have a seat on the sofa. May I get you a glass of white wine?" I was attempting to be welcoming. When we returned from the kitchen with our beverages, I took a few sips before asking why she wanted to meet. "Despite everything, Blake, I still love you as much," she confessed. "I never expected things to get this bad." I said, "I know what you wanted. You wanted me to accept Cross's lifestyle. It appeared easy enough. You could have been the cold. I could have had fun with Cross," she explained. "We might have made a lot of money and ultimately everything would have returned to normal. I spoiled your plans," I replied sarcastically. "Actually, the plans were more of Cross's doing. He believed he could intimidate you into going along." She admits that neither of us anticipated you to react this forcefully. It was unlike you, given how laid back and easygoing you typically are. I suppose this is why he thought I was simple to manipulate. I guessed. Tracy said, "You have no idea how scared I was when I saw how violent you became. It's a side of myself I've been trying to hide. It has remained hidden since I served as a Marine in the Middle East. That is not who I am today," I explained. Tracy asked unexpectedly, "Where is your car?" "I'm not quite sure. When Cross threatened to plant pills in it, I took it seriously and had it transferred somewhere he couldn't discover." I laughed about those males in the house when you moved back in. What were they up to? They appeared overly interested. "What about the garage and my missing car?" I inquired. Tracy grudgingly confessed. "I believe they wanted to place evidence in your automobile. I did not want them to, but Stanley insisted that we frame you. You don't appear to care about accumulating evidence against me. Your tale could send me to prison. If you truly love me, simply disclose the truth and the DA will drop the charges," I pleaded. "I can't, Blake. I am in too deep. Stanley is too influential," she reasoned. "This sounds like terrible luck for me," I commented. Then I asked, "What is the charge of offending you?" "The photographs show that you have wounds and bruises. I never touched you. It was Stanley's plan. He came up with an alternate version as soon as you stepped out. He claimed you accused us of having an affair. Then they started hitting me. When he intervened, a brawl ensued. He claims you damaged his nose, darkened his eye, and shot Max before he could help make it credible. Tracy confessed that he hit her several times. I apologize, Blake. Tracy sobbed. I never did this. I simply want things to return to how they were between us. Well, that is not possible, I responded firmly. There is a way out, Blake, Tracy stated earnestly. Stanley is well aware of your heroic history and difficulties with PTSD. He expects you to plead guilty based on that. He claims he can use his connections to get you admitted to a VA hospital for treatment. After that, we could start over, just ourselves and the kids. So there was her aim to get me to take a plea bargain in exchange for a lesser sentence. I pretended to consider it. Tracy, that sounds promising, but I need some time to consider. I also need to discuss this with Uncle Jack. He hasn't had much success gathering proof to assist me. Do it for yourself, Blake. She advocated for us and the children. It will all be over in a few years. I seriously doubt that, I replied. You cheated on me. You wanted me to accept your affair, threatened to take my children, and are now framing me. That's not only a stumbling block. That's why Stanley's offer is the perfect solution for everyone, Tracy insisted tearfully. I'll think about it, I said, concluding the conversation. I suggested she leave, but she wanted to stay, suggesting we forget about our difficulties for a bit. Tracy, this is not happening, I replied strongly. I held firm, and Tracy got the message. Please consider Stanley's offer, she pleaded. I escorted her to the door before departing. She hugged me. It felt sincere, yet I did not hug back. The hearing was to determine whether I would stand trial. The prosecution appeared confident. They called Cross, Max, and Tracy to the stand, each repeating their scripted versions of events. Uncle Jack asked them just one question. Do you swear that your testimony is true? They all affirmed. Uncle Jack sought to expose Jose and Miguel by establishing that their involvement in framing me was unrelated to my allegations. Nonetheless, their endeavors failed. When the prosecution was concluded, it was Uncle Jack's turn. He began with authorization from the court. We would want to submit a video of the events. It confirms my client's innocence. The ADA objected, alleging that the evidence was new. There is a reason behind this, Uncle Jack revealed. We are concerned about potential bias against my client. Do you have any evidence of bias? The judge inquired. It's in the video, Your Honor, Uncle Jack responded. The judge proposed reviewing it in chambers, but Uncle Jack declined. Why not? The judge commanded. We do not trust the court's impartiality, Uncle Jack asserted. Do you accuse the court of corruption? The judge inquired, growing agitated. Your Honor, Uncle Jack replied. Mr. Carter, can you support your claim, or is that evidence included in the video? Yes, Your Honor, but I'd like to demonstrate what I mean if you could answer a few questions. Let me get things straight, Mr. Carter. You feel that by asking me questions, you can prove that this court is prejudiced against your client. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor, Uncle Jack affirmed. Okay, Mr. Carter, go ahead and ask your questions. But if you can't support your position, we'll study the tape in private, and I'll decide if it's admissible. I agree, Your Honor. But I must warn you that if this film is not allowed in court and my client is convicted based on the prosecution's testimony, I will release it to the public. Furthermore, the evidence in this video may cast question on your honesty for not presenting it in court. I feel like I'm being threatened, Mr. Carter, the judge said, without waiting for the judge to become enraged. Uncle Jack proceeded. Your Honor, your oldest son attends college, correct? He's at the Air Force Academy, right? Yes, the judge responded. He is a freshman. Isn't it incredibly competitive to get into the Air Force Academy? The judge confirmed. First, your son needed to apply through a congressman or senator. Then he took the civil service exam. Based on that, he was nominated among 9 others. He then underwent medical examinations, fitness tests, and aptitude testing. He also had to take the SAT. Is this all correct, Your Honor? Yes, the judge replied. He was a good student and member of the high school swim team. You should be proud of him, Your Honor, Uncle Jack acknowledged. Get to the point, Mr. Carter. The judge advised that your son's application package contained 3 recommendation letters, correct? Yes. Mr. Carter. Who composed the letters, Your Honor? One was from his swim coach, the other from his math teacher. Who wrote the 3rd letter, Your Honor? There was a pause. The judge then responded. Mr. Stanley Cross gave my son an excellent reference for the Air Force Academy. Mr. Cross must have known your son well unless he made up details. Uncle Jack noticed. During the summers of high school, my son interned in Mr. Cross's office. He wants to be a lawyer, the judge explained. So Mr. Cross is more of a professional acquaintance than a family buddy, Uncle Jack clarified. He is an acquaintance and colleague in some of the legal associations I belong to, the judge clarified. Now, Your Honor, you may understand why the defense perceives your impartiality differently. Uncle Jack concluded, you have questioned my integrity, counselor, while any link with Mr. Cross would have no bearing on my decisions. You've made it a matter of perception, the judge said. After a little pause, the judge looked up and spoke. Play the video, counselor. Uncle Jack signaled for the lights to dim and the screens to descend. He turned to me and murmured, Here we go, Blake. Before the video began in court, the atmosphere strained as Cross revealed his law enforcement ties, stunning the prosecution and leading an assistant ADA to cry. Uncle Jack displayed a video of Cross, Max, and Tracy, who tried to flee but were apprehended by the judge. After the first video, Uncle Jack instantly played a second one, taking everyone off surprise and displaying Tracy's unintentional admission, which was filmed on my hidden iPhone. This resulted in a recess, and the ADA reviewed the new evidence. When the court reconvened, 3 prosecution witnesses were conspicuously absent. Instead of a substitute district attorney, the county's current district attorney was present. He took no time in addressing the court. Firstly, he stated that all charges against Mr. Ramsey had been dismissed. We believe he used self-defense against Mr. Cross and Mr. Angel. It was forceful, but it was deserved. Second, my office has filed arrest warrants for Mr. Stanley Cross, Mr. Max Angel, and Mrs. Blake Ramsey for a variety of charges, including conspiracy, perjury, making false statements, and obstruction of justice. Furthermore, Mr. Cross's attempted planting of false evidence against Mr. Ramsey has been discovered, with Mr. Angel and Mrs. Ramsey's involvement noted. We are also in the process of apprehending 2 people implicated in these attempts. Stanley Cross, Max Angel, and my wife were all arrested but eventually released on bond. The district attorney was furious to hear that Stanley Cross had been influencing his office for many years. He initiated an investigation to discover and remove any co-workers with potential Cross connections. All defendants were found guilty despite pleading innocence, with the exception of Max and Tracy, who confessed against him. Cross received 11 years with a maximum of 7, and Tracy's 3 years were lowered from 5 after my testimony highlighted her warning about Cross's attack. Jose and Miguel obstructed justice and tampered with evidence, which led to their arrest as minors. Video possession. Miguel confessed. Both were condemned to lengthy prison terms. Cross is currently being imprisoned in county jail while awaiting transfer to a state prison. Max and Tracy were given 2 weeks to settle their affairs before surrendering. Max prepares his family for his absence, aiming for parole in 4 years. Tracy, who received a reduced term, will serve his time in a rural jail annex set up by Uncle Jack. I let Tracy look after the kids while I was away. She took the opportunity to bond with them and explain her absence. Tracy requested me to move in the day before her capitulation. When I came, she greeted me, saying, "This is your home." Dressed casually but composedly, she stood at the door with a tiny bag, joking that it included everything she needed in the kitchen. Tracy had prepared a light breakfast. We discussed Lucy coming to take her to the sheriff's office at 11 a.m. She told me that Lucy would assist with the children and persuaded me to accept her help. Tracy wanted me to settle in before the kids arrived home from school so that their routine would not be disrupted. She was hesitant about visits while in prison, but she vowed to write frequently and requested me to have the children write to her as well. She had packed all of her belongings in plastic containers and stashed them in the basement. She placed a family photo in each child's room so they would not forget her. Tracy added that she ordered a new king-size bed for the master bedroom, along with fresh linens and blankets, which had recently arrived but had gone unused. As she talked, tears welled up in her eyes. We hadn't shared our own feelings until she began to pick up the table. I told her to wait and suggested we go to the family room with our coffees. She glanced at her watch and knew she didn't have much time left. Tracy appeared really apologetic. She reminded me of the woman I married, not the one inspired by Stanley Cross Blake, she began. I cannot convey how sorry I am for what I did and how I treated you. You were an incredible husband, parent, and provider. You were my best friend and an excellent companion. I forgot that till now I accept full responsibility for my conduct. Despite Stanley Cross's influence, I made the wrong decisions. I am so ashamed. It's hard to face you right now, not just for you, but for our families, friends, and especially the kids. Part of me is relieved to be going somewhere. I won't have to face you or see your disappointment. I know you won't forget, but I hope with time it'll fade and you'll forgive me. That's what I'm holding on to now. Tracy finished speaking and wiped her tears before standing in front of me to ask if I wanted more coffee. I grabbed her into a close hug. She cried, and we held each other until she relaxed. When Tracy heard Lucy's car honk, she knew she had to leave. After wiping away her tears, she grabbed her belongings and told me she loved me before leaving. I remained behind, sorting my items. A few hours later, Lucy called to express her support. I welcomed her company, knowing we needed to talk about raising my children together. Living without their mother, I assumed the role of a single father, ensuring Tyler, Beth, and Emily were safe. Lucy was a great assistance. We waited about a month after taking on the role of mother to pay Tracy a visit. Lucy went first with the kids and returned, excited to see Tracy. Lucy described a comfortable visiting space within the prison, which alleviated our concerns. Tracy was 3 months into her sentence when I paid her a visit. She seemed upbeat, particularly among the children. However, she still felt deeply regret. During a visit, Tracy's buddy Candy introduced herself. Candy, nicknamed Dummy for her choices, came to regret her deeds. After a year, Tracy may be eligible for release soon. Uncle Jack suggested that she take online paralegal courses at the University of Virginia, which is a good career route. Tracy consented and enrolled, citing her legal background. Meanwhile, Lucy and I worked to locate Tracy a place to live after she got out. We located a little 2-bedroom home with a carport near the courtroom and law offices in the city. We bought it with the expectation that Tracy would repay us later. Lucy brought her up alone on the day of her release due to paperwork. Tracy burst into tears of pleasure when they arrived at her new home. Her family and mine were present to welcome her, as were Uncle Jack and his wife. The children gave her a tour of the house and prepared her dinner on the balcony. Tracy expressed her gratitude to everyone for welcoming her, despite the fact that her previous uncle assisted her in setting up job interviews with several law companies, for which she was grateful. After Tracy settled down and began working at the law business that Uncle Jack recommended, she invited me over to dinner. She prepared my favorite supper, meatloaf with potatoes and peas. During supper, we avoided discussing the past and instead focused on other things such as the kids' work and the weather. After supper, we proceeded to the family room, where Tracy was playing soothing background music from the music channel on the television. I invited you over tonight, Blake. She began because I wanted to speak about us, or rather, you and I. What do you believe will happen to us? I'm unsure what the future holds. I said, I don't have a crystal ball either, Tracy, but this is what I believe is most likely. We'll keep raising our kids as a team. They need you as much as they do me. Having you back home has lightened my load quite a little. I now have some free time that I didn't have before, and I'm sure you'll love having some alone time without the kids. In contrast to you, I've had a relatively active social life, nothing overly serious, but it's been good to go out to dinner or see a movie every now and then. I believe you will appreciate being more socially involved after you have established in. Do you ever want to be with me again? Permanently? Tracy inquired whether you meant getting married again. No, I replied. I've been through too much to consider marrying you again, but I've moved on from what happened. And I'm looking forward to always being friends with no romantic attachment, but that's as near as we'll ever get. Tracy looked down, tears welling in her eyes. I didn't think so, but I needed to inquire. I believe in the coming years, I will become more social and may even begin dating more seriously, I added. I'll eventually find someone I love and ask her to marry me. She could be unmarried, divorced, or widowed, with or without children. But I will meet someone. The same goes for you. I told Tracy that once she settled into her new life, she would most likely find someone she could love. They'll probably ask you to marry them. But it doesn't mean we won't see each other frequently. We will always have the children to bring us together. We will be there for birthdays, holidays, and possibly even vacations. In the future, there will be graduations and weddings. That's all we can aspire for in terms of being together. It's definitely more than I deserve, Tracy said sadly, but I can accept that future. Before you depart, I want you to know how grateful I am for the way you've treated me since I returned home. She added, "You could have easily shut me out and kept the kids away from me. But you didn't. That is not who you are." "It only makes me feel worse about what I tried to do to you," I replied, as I opened the door to go. "You may not have noticed, Tracy, but I have forgiven you. I harbor no grudges against you, and I hope that you will be able to forgive yourself with time. Perhaps eventually, but not any time soon," Tracy replied. We hugged each other and held on for several minutes without saying anything. Then I let go. I stepped outside into the fresh air, located my car, and drove home without saying anything else. What are your opinions about this story? Please let me know in the comments below. Now for the following story. Please enjoy. I discovered my wife's infidelity in July, and I've been living in a personal hell ever since. It was completely unexpected. I would have never suspected it. Initially, I could not believe she was capable of betrayal. For nearly 8 years, our marriage had been a source of great joy for me. Renowned psychiatrist Elizabeth Kubler-Ross famously argued that people confronting death or another traumatic event go through 5 emotional stages: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. I remembered this framework from a psychology lecturer in college. Denial is the initial step, and I found myself completely immersed in it. If Sherry had been unfaithful, our marriage was almost certainly over. But I fought to accept the unpleasant fact. I wondered if I would go through each stage of sorrow over the death of our love, and if, even after acceptance, the pain and heartbreak would haunt me permanently. I met Sherry during my college years. I was studying in computer science and was required to work in English class as part of my program. The prospect of reading literature and poetry by long-dead authors bored me. Like the archetypal computer nerd, my mind was already racing with lines of code and ideas of where the next party would be. I was tall and gawky, and my social life was, to say the least, disappointing. I was an ordinary student, not very athletic, and did not join in any groups or extracurricular activities. But I excelled at computers. Everyone recognized me, but they couldn't remember my name. My romantic life was similarly humdrum. It included a brief affair with Lillian Morris upon high school graduation. I believe she pitied me. We lasted about 2 months until she moved on. After Lillian, my fellow computer geeks and I would brag about our fictitious romantic escapades and speculate about the hot girl in class, knowing full well that it was all imagination. Then Sherry came along. She sat next to me, speaking English, and her deep hazel eyes captured me right away. During that first lesson, I was too focused on her eyes to notice anything else. But as she went, I had a peek of the entire bundle. Sherry had shoulder-length blonde hair with a tiny curl, a lovely button nose, and lips that appeared to be smiling at all times. She was about 5'7", and while I'm not good at calculating bra sizes, I could see she filled out her shirt nicely. Her tight pants perfectly displayed her toned behind to me. She was perfect every day following that first meeting. I made it a point to sit beside her. After a month, she finally communicated with me. She commented on my calculus books and asked if I might tutor her. She explained that she was struggling with college algebra and needed to pass the class to graduate. I would have agreed to anything. She requested. We started meeting in the library after class every Tuesday and Thursday. While I tried to remain attentive, sitting next to the most gorgeous female I had ever seen often reduced my mind to mush. Yet something must have worked since Sherry received a B on her midterm exam. She was overjoyed when she found out her grade. She hopped up and down before giving me a happy hug. She kissed my cheek, and I thought my head was about to burst. I was in heaven. Then, completely out of character, I blurted out, "Do you want to see a movie on Friday?" "Sure. What time?" She responded effortlessly. "Wait, what?" I stammered. I answered, "Yes, dummy. I don't think my feet touched the ground on the walk back to my dorm room." I spent the remainder of the week in a delightful daze, even going to the store to get a new pair of Dockers and a polo shirt for the occasion. My nerd buddies mocked me mercilessly, but I accepted it all with a smile. I was counting down the minutes until our date, and I somehow made it through till Friday night. Finally arrived. Our first date was to see the most recent Halloween flick. I know it's not the most advanced option. It was a standard slasher film, complete with blood, dismemberment, and dumb individuals. I assumed she'd end up clinging to me in fear, but that was not the case. Nevertheless, we had a great time. Sherry and I murmured predictions about which character would die next. She was correct more often than I was. Later, she gave me a short goodnight kiss on her porch. By the fourth date, she had invited me to her dorm room, and it was the first time we were intimate. It must have been beneficial for her because she invited me back up after our next outing. We officially became a couple after that. Surprisingly, we found we had a lot in common. We watched the same movies, read the same books, and preferred the same meals. After a few months, I became profoundly in love. As finals approached, I was confident she felt the same way. We were ecstatic shortly before Christmas break, while resting on her bed. I told her I loved her and thought she was the best thing that had ever happened to me. She smiled and replied, "I love you too." Life was perfect. Despite the fact that we did not have any classes together during the spring semester, we continued to study together in the library after school. Our relationship resumed exactly where it had left off after the break. We spent spring break together, growing stronger by the week and renting a cabin by the lake. My plans included hiking and fishing, but I don't think we left the cottage all week. On the last night, I went down on one knee and proposed. She said yes. We graduated 3 months later and got married 5 months after that. After graduating school, I got a job in computer security. Our company specialized in integrating security software for small enterprises, often with 10 to 50 workstations. My responsibilities included writing code to allow various systems to communicate properly. My boss, Clinton, started the company a decade ago with only 2 people. Through a series of mergers and acquisitions, the company grew to over 50 workers and was thriving. Clinton was not only a superb boss, but also an excellent mentor. After I had been with the company for around 5 years, Clinton received an offer to sell it. He indicated that a major venture capital firm in town required our specialization in the small business sector to supplement a larger computing division. The offer was too good to pass up, so he sold the company. Part of the deal was that we all kept our jobs and Clinton stayed on as manager. The changeover was effortless. We never met the new owners, and Clinton continued to run the business. As usual. Work continued undisturbed. Sherry, on the other hand, got a job soon after graduation with Dr. Albert Barnes, a dentist. She assumed the post of office manager. Dr. Barnes, a nice elderly dentist, reminded me of the absent-minded professor, replete with the funny glasses perched on the point of his nose that he was constantly losing. Dr. Barnes, despite his frequently puzzled appearance, was a dental expert. His abilities were unsurpassed in the area, bringing patients from long distances who could arrange an appointment. When Sherry started, the office was disorganized. Bills were unpaid, files were misplaced, and billing systems were out of date. In short, it was a complete disaster. Sherry took on the challenge of rejuvenating the doctor's practice, and her efforts had remarkable results. Within 3 years, the doctor's office had become the envy of the community. Revenue surged, employee turnover has eliminated, morale reached an all-time high, and the doctor's appearance improved. Sherry was the driving force behind these tremendous improvements, and I couldn't have been prouder. Following our wedding, Sherry and I moved into a cozy apartment near my employment. We opted to advance our jobs before establishing a family. We made it a custom to go on vacation every year on our anniversary. We were only able to visit our lakeside cabin at first due to monetary concerns. However, as time passed, our trips improved. One unforgettable year. We even spent a week at Walt Disney World in Florida. After 5 years of apartment living, we began looking for a house. After a few months of hunting, we discovered a small home with plenty of room for our future family. We purchased it and moved in. We're eager to begin this new chapter in our life. Sherry, 7 years into her job, returned home full of excitement. Her outstanding managerial and organizing abilities at the doctor's office had not gone unnoticed. Some high-profile CEOs who were patients of the wonderful doctor started asking about Sherry. They were impressed with the office's change and mentioned it to Dr. Albert Barnes, who couldn't thank Sherry enough. That night, one of these executives approached Sherry with a job offer, which we discussed extensively over the next 2 days. I thought we were on the verge of beginning a baby, and choosing this new job would put that off by a few years. We were financially stable, and Dr. Albert Barnes was nearly like family to us. However, she hoped that the new post would lead to even more opportunities in the future. She recommended that if we could postpone starting a family for a few years, it would be worth the wait. I felt I had little choice. I eventually gave in. A month later, Sherry started working as the personal assistant to Cascade Capital's Vice President of Finance, Jason Foster. Unbeknownst to me at the time, Cascade Capital was the venture capital firm that eventually purchased the company where I was already employed. At first, I saw no substantial changes in Sherry or our relationship. Our intimate moments did lessen, but I attributed this to the occasionally irregular hours she and her boss worked. She occasionally had to attend late meetings, which left her fatigued when she returned home. As the months passed, it became clear that our marriage was failing. Despite my best efforts to please her, Sherry rejected all of my advances. In fact, I don't believe we were intimate at all during the 2 months leading up to the awards ceremony. I never considered the possibility that she was cheating on me. I uncovered Sherry's affair with her boss on the night of her company's annual awards banquet. The news was too much to take in. Every year, we attended this event to celebrate the company's achievements and recognize significant contributors. We rented ourselves for the event. I still couldn't get my head around Sherry cheating. I replayed the previous months in my brain and discovered nothing strange. I really believed in her love. I adored her and completely trusted her. In retrospect, I may have been blinded by love. I needed real proof of Sherry's unfaithfulness, something I could see for myself. Determined to confront reality, I watched her intently as she prepared. Throughout the journey, I remained mainly silent about her dress, cosmetics, lipstick amount, underwear, stockings, and everything else. Sherry was excited because her boss, Mr. Foster, was receiving an award, possibly for making the most profit or for his numerous affairs. If the reports were accurate, my fury would undoubtedly surface. I knew I needed to keep it under control in order to find out the truth. At that point, I understood. Bruce Banner strained to keep his anger under control. We arrived just on time, as Justice Sherry had arranged. She raced off to make sure everything was operating smoothly. About 15 minutes later, Mr. Foster arrived, followed by his beautiful wife. Why would he need Sherry when he already had a stunning girlfriend at home? I went to the bar, grabbed a drink, and observed him from a distance. People flocked to him like he was royalty, hoping to curry favor. I observed his phony grins and how he tried to please everyone around him. I loathed him very immediately. Sherry remained on his side. Emily, Foster's wife, moved away to greet some of the other executive wives from across the room. I paid close attention to Foster and Sherry. They exchanged glances. The light touches the arm. They exchanged smiles. This was certainly more than just a boss-personal assistant relationship. Dinner was quickly followed. Foster and his wife sat at the head table while we were seated at another close table. Sherry selected the seat facing Foster. Thus began the usual, tedious awards banquet. The main meal was plastic chicken, with pompous lectures serving as an equally unappealing dessert. After supper, the tables were cleared to make way for dancing. I tried to keep Sherry close, but she regularly claimed needing to help Foster with various things. Every time they were together, I tried to keep an eye on them. The distractions, such as Sherry's co-workers striking up talks, frequently made it difficult. Sherry and I did manage to dance a few times, both slowly and quickly, sometimes in tight embrace and other times with space between us. By just after midnight, I was exhausted. I recommended to Sherry that we consider leaving, and after some hesitation, she consented. But she wanted one last dance on that evening, and my world crumbled. Sherry was no longer wearing underpants at our previous dances. I could tell she'd been. I was devastated. She'd never gone without underwear in our entire relationship, even when I urged her to, but clearly she did it for him. We exchanged short goodbyes and drove home in silence. Each of us was immersed in our own thoughts. For me, it was a journey into my own hell. Sherry ran upstairs after returning home, claiming that she needed to take a shower before bed. I murmured a response that was no longer relevant. I took off my suit, hunted carefully, and slipped into bed. A few minutes later, Sherry slipped into bed alongside me wearing a soft cotton nightgown. She leaned in and whispered, "Wasn't it a wonderful night? I fell asleep." She kissed my cheek and turned away. Within minutes, her respiration decreased, indicating that she had fallen asleep. That's when the first tears streamed down my pillow. The next morning, standing under the scalding spray of my shower, I felt a maelstrom of emotions: love, hatred, rage, and pain. My mind jumped from ideas of retribution to periods of leniency, from emotions of inadequacy for not being man enough to keep my girlfriend, to self-reproach for not discovering her deception sooner. Finally, a sensation of accomplishment over my discovery developed. My ideas cascaded and collided, resulting in nothing but a deafening clamor in my head. By the end of the shower, one emotion reigned supreme: rage. I'd make him pay somehow. In the days that followed, I became preoccupied with how to make him pay for ruining my marriage. There had to be some way. I knew Sherry was also at fault. She'd lied to me. We betrayed our promises of fidelity. I retraced our relationship steps, wondering where it all went wrong. I wondered if I had lost her respect, or if she had been persuaded by his wealth and power. I had trusted her and given her years of my life. Within her years, I was never able to reclaim. Both would pay. After a few days, the solution became clear. Sherry claimed to have gone to the mall to shop for new shoes. Her laptop remained unattended on the counter. If I could get into their company's system, I might be able to make them suffer. As a computer security specialist, I was certain that I could break into their system. I turned on her computer, connected to her work network, and waited for the password question. Knowing Sherry, her password would be easy to guess. But before I tried, I noticed her day planner on the counter, which she had married to a computer security specialist. Dare to break the first rule of passwords. I opened the planner, went to the letter P, and there was her password. As I flipped through the day planner, I hit the jackpot. Foster's Logon credentials were also logged, as well as credit card details, bank accounts, birth dates, and social security numbers. I made a quick trip to Kinko's and copied every page from her day planner. I would look at their system again a few days later. The opportunity I had been waiting for has finally arrived. Sherry left her computer alone on the counter when she left abruptly. I started it up and logged in with her password, since she collaborated closely with the vice president. Her access was almost boundless. I could see payroll, purchasing, accounting, and the majority of the manufacturing systems, navigating to the email system. I took a quick glance. I wasn't interested in going through all of Sherry's emails, especially the ones involving her love life. I was already battling to maintain my composure. I was looking for a means to exact my revenge in this maze of data. The accounting system drew my attention. It was unexpectedly simple and badly secured. My repayment answer might be hidden here. The purchasing system revealed that once an invoice was entered, it needed to be approved before being paid. A font asked me if I could change an authorized invoice to move funds to an account in Foster's name. The auditors would undoubtedly catch it. Foster's career would be ruined. Sherry would lose her work, and their affair would be over. The next day, I implemented the strategy using information from Sherry's day planner. I opened a bank account in Foster's name at a downtown bank for good measure. I did the same thing at the bank across the street. With your new account information ready, all I needed was another opportunity with Sherry's PC to start the transfer. While Sherry was at the gym the next day, I made my move. Logging in with Foster's credentials, I went straight to the counting system and discovered an accepted invoice. The invoice included a space for a manufacturer rebate, which I changed to 3% when entering Foster's bank information into the routing field. I repeated the process for a second invoice, redirecting the rebate to the other bank account. Feeling a mix of triumph and melancholy, I poured myself a drink, this time choosing a decent scotch. I toasted my supposedly excellent strategy with one glass and used the next to blot off memories of my failing marriage. Days passed with no signs of retaliation, no police investigations, no scandalous headlines, nothing. Frustrated but undeterred, I recognized that the scale needs to be adjusted at the next opportunity. I repeated the process on numerous more bills, raising the rebate to 4%. Meanwhile, our home life became increasingly stressful. I stopped making any attempts to contact Sherry, and she, in turn, withdrew herself from me. Late evenings were my shelter, and I would watch the Bulls, Blackhawks, Bears, or any other available game on cable TV. Sherry commented on my sudden interest in sports, to which I responded that these games were important and a regular topic of business conversations. My complicated plan was set. It was only a matter of time before their deception unraveled and came crashing down. I found it extremely difficult to even touch Sherry. Knowing she had given what had once been mine to someone else made my mind spin. After a hug or a quick kiss, I'd frequently rush to the nearest restroom, overwhelmed with. Then everything changed. The next day at work, Clinton summoned me to his office. He said corporate wanted to send me to New York to update the branch office's security systems. I stared at Clinton, perplexed. Yes, they expressly asked for you. They want you to travel out Monday morning and return on Friday. Your duty is to upgrade all of the workstations and servers in the New York office. Clinton, I cannot handle that. Updating software is not a job. Why me? Clinton said. I have no idea. I attempted to explain that is not what we do and definitely not what you do. But they persisted. It needs to be you, nobody else. Then it struck me. My wife's lover wanted me away for a few days. I suppose they needed more quality time together. Resigned. I told Clinton, okay, I'll go. Thanks. I have never had corporations make such demands before, and I hope they do not continue. He handed over the flight tickets. I assumed this farce would continue as long as Foster was out of jail. I decided to step up my revenge strategy. Later that night, Sherry and I were eating dinner. Things had been strange at home recently. I tried not to strangle her, and she tried not to sleep with me. I'd tried my hand at seduction a few times before, only to be turned down cold. Not that I could have followed through, but I wanted to maintain appearances. I explained that I needed to go to New York for the next week. She claimed that she would miss me. Then she mentioned how enthusiastic she was about the theater. Next week, I looked up from my plate. She promptly revised her narrative, claiming she was heading to the movie theater with her pals to see the latest chick flick. I pretended I didn't see the untruth. I wondered where Foster's wife would be. She must also be out of town. What excuse did he give her? I needed some scotch. I've started utilizing scotch as anesthesia more and more recently. That was not good. Sherry's involvement in the New York fiasco drew my attention. The next day, I secretly opened several bank accounts in her name at 2 downtown banks. I logged in before the weekend and made changes to more bills. I transferred some rebates to Foster's accounts and others to Sherry's new accounts. They were now on unstable footing. I could feel a fundamental difference within myself. The easygoing, friendly persona that everyone was used to was dissolving, giving way to a darker, more sinister aspect. I hadn't realized it existed. One that I was positive I would dislike, Dan. I wondered why their account teams hadn't discovered the thefts yet. Their slowness confused me. The trip to New York was both educational and exhausting. The flight was terrible. I love to fly. The additional time required to navigate airport security simply added to the tedium. I arrived completely fatigued as soon as I got to the motel. I crashed the next morning, bright and early. I got to the branch office around 2 p.m. I'd upgraded the entire office. I then spent the rest of the day and the next repairing minor problems. Frayed cables, 2 damaged graphics cards, and a failed hard drive. The entire excursion seemed like a waste of my time. With each passing minute, my rage at the adulterous couple grew. I went back to my hotel room on Tuesday night and did not leave until Friday, with the exception of a quick visit to the Empire State Building. I arrived home very drained. I gave Sherry a little kiss on the cheek and went directly to bed. She seems relieved to evade my probing questions. The New York trip prompted me to reconsider my ultimate goal. One outcome was the person I was looking for, Emily, who was Foster's wife. In the following weeks, I was able to log into Foster's system a couple more times. I hoped the auditors would catch on quickly. Significant amounts of money had already been stowed away in various accounts. Then I was sent to Denver. Clinton summoned me to his office and indicated that the New York office was delighted with my work and expected the same results in Denver. Clinton shrugged, professing ignorance about why I was picked. When I landed in Denver, the procedure was repeated for a few days on basic system security, with the remainder spent in my hotel room. I used Sherry's computer to access her lover's bogus bank accounts. They held more than $1 million. As our divorce date approached, a notion occurred to me. Could this money be considered communal property? I chuckled at the absurdity. Over the next few days, the notion of that money kept bothering me. If I pursued legal action against Foster, I could definitely get a large payout. What if I just took the money? I struggled with the moral and legal implications. Was I exchanging one immoral action for another? Did I have what it takes to do anything like that? After all, they had ruined my life and deprived me of any dignity. Was I actually thinking rationally? Screw it. I decided, let's do this. A week later, employment sent me to Miami. This time, I had a plan. By Tuesday, I had finished all of the security updates, and by Wednesday morning, I was on a fast flight to the Bahamas. It was surprisingly straightforward to open a bank account in Foster's name. My next destination was the Cayman Islands, where I set up another account in Sherry's name. I returned to Miami just in time for my trip home. When I arrived at O'Hare, absolutely weary, I went straight to bed and didn't wake up until noon Saturday. 2 weeks later, I was flying to Boston. The logistics were a little more complicated this time, but I was still able to sneak over to Zurich and open a few accounts. After returning home, I began transferring money to the overseas accounts, routinely moving funds between them. This routine persisted for several months. Every 3 weeks or so, work assigned me to run errands: Seattle, Phoenix, Atlanta, and more cities. The Phoenix journey afforded an opportunity to cross the border into Mexico City and open yet another account. Each new account represented a fresh stop in the transfer of money offshore. At home, I maintained logging into Foster's accounting system, changing invoices and routing funds to local banks before sending them overseas. The pleasure of my clandestine operations was the only thing keeping me sane throughout that time. My relationship with Sherry had degraded into that of mere housemates. Our paths crossed irregularly, but she lived in her own universe, one I was no longer aware of. Attempts at reconciliation were futile. Any attempt to get close was met with discussions over petty topics: how I loaded the dishwasher, or where I put my coffee cup. These arguments seemed designed to keep me at arm's length, denying me any appearance of affection. In November, I was extremely pleased with a particularly ridiculous episode. I was able to glance at Sherry's calendar and noted a day when she and Foster were due to meet for lunch. I waited for their lunch appointment to begin before purchasing a dozen roses and visiting her office. The women present thrilled over the flowers, complimenting me as a lovely husband, but told me Sherry was in a meeting as they were ready to depart for lunch. I asked to leave the flowers on her desk, and they agreed. After entering Sherry's office, I quickly locked the door, sat at her desk, and entered into her computer. I mailed a couple of bills and entered one of the bank accounts, fully aware that this activity would create a digital trail if the auditors ever discovered anything. This would definitely help their investigation. I went to Foster's office and repeated the procedure while using Foster's computer. Curiosity got the best of me, and I discovered a carefully hidden folder containing compromising images of Sherry. Though the sight hurt me, it didn't leave as much of an impression as it did when I first learned about the affair. I silently exited after copying the full folder on a thumb drive that I always carried with me. About a month later, I informed Sherry that I had registered in a pottery course at the local community college. Scheduled for Tuesday and Thursday nights, she could barely contain her enthusiasm at the prospect of spending 2 more evenings with her sweetheart. This was part of my emerging escape strategy, and spending time away from Sherry reduced my tension. My contrived job excursions continued without interfering with my class attendance. After communicating with the instructor and explaining my situation, I received a B in the course. The affair showed no prospects of resolution, and the auditors remained unconcerned. I wondered how these people were so successful despite their stupidity. But then I remembered Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and I understood that perhaps I shouldn't be surprised. I knew everything was going to end shortly. Sherry's company had to close its accounts by the end of the fiscal year, and they needed to locate the missing funds before then. And they did. I was on a trip when Sherry called me in a panic. I was relaxing by the hotel pool in Los Angeles when she announced that an audit was ongoing and she would be late. She told me not to call her that night as I sipped my banana fuzzy umbrella drink. I responded, "Yes, dear. Good luck." I immediately executed my exit strategy. I transferred funds to the Mexico account and flew there. Around lunchtime, I withdrew all of the money in bearer bonds and placed them in a safe deposit box in Los Angeles. Sherry called again, stating that there were significant concerns and asking if I could get home fast. I told her I wasn't finished with the security duties, but I'd attempt to be back by Thursday. I smiled as I ordered another banana drink. The thunderstorm has arrived. The next morning, the internet was abuzz with reports of their arrest. The headlines read, "Executive and Mistress in Massive Swindle." The photos were unflattering. The paper described how funds were stolen from numerous accounts for the lovers' personal use, with auditors tracing some of the money to the Grand Caymans. They were contacting Cayman authorities to gain access to the account. The bail was set at $1 million apiece. I arrived home Thursday night and was at the courthouse early Friday morning, using my house as collateral. I had Sherry released by 2 p.m. We drove home in silence, and Sherry cried. When she reached the door, she hurried upstairs to take a shower, claiming she needed to get rid of the jail scent. It reminded me of her hasty trip to the shower after last year's awards dinner. I poured myself a scotch and waited below. Sherry returned downstairs a few minutes later, wearing a long bathrobe. She sat across from me, saying that she had done nothing wrong and had not taken any money. She maintained her innocence and did not confirm or refute the affair, and I did not bring it up either. I assured her that it must be a mistake and advised that we hire an attorney to contest the charges. The atmosphere at home got strained as I anticipated the trial. Sherry spoke briefly and never mentioned Foster. My routine became a repetitive cycle of going to work and coming home. Foster and Sherry resolved to fight the allegations together, and they met with their attorney on occasion. Aside from these sessions, Sherry remained home. I had no idea if their affair had continued, but I was aware that Foster's wife, Emily, had filed for divorce. Sherry made an attempt to be kind to me. When I arrived home, she generally had a meal ready. Though she never mentioned Foster or the prior year, it appears she was attempting to move on and keep us together. She tried to seduce me a few times, and I let her at work. I followed the case through newspaper reporting. They described how the feds followed the money from the Caymans to Zurich and then Mexico. However, the route turned frigid there. No money had been found yet. I half expected the cops to arrest me, but they did not. As the trial approached, Sherry worked harder to win me over. Unfortunately, it was too late. I visited with the divorce attorney and had him draft the documents. The trial itself lasted just 3 days. By then, the media had moved on to other stories. In court, Sherry and Foster sat at opposing sides of the defendant's table, with their attorneys in between. I spent all 3 days listening to the auditors recount the crime and trace the money flow. They made a compelling case linking the transactions to Foster and Sherry's logins. The defense claimed that the credentials could have been compromised. However, the prosecution has successfully linked the transactions to their computers. They were both in serious difficulty. The prosecution portrayed Foster as dominating and manipulative, and Sherry as an easily swayed accomplice. It seems like the jurors bought the story. After 3 days of deliberation, the jury retired to reach its decision. Sherry and I entered a tiny conference room and took our seats. I had to stop reaching inside my pocket. I took out the divorce papers and cited irreconcilable differences. Sherry welcomed them with a mournful expression. "I was thinking about filing for adultery," I said, but this was never verified. "Sherry, you cut in swiftly. I have photos," I responded. Her expression plummeted as I reached into my pocket and pulled out a stack of photographs. I handed her the top one, which depicted Emily and myself on top of the Empire State Building. "This is not infidelity on your part. On my—" I continued, "Foster's wife, Emily, visited my office on the day of the awards banquet last year. She had a private investigator following her husband and had evidence of his affairs. And by affairs, I mean you weren't his first." I was crushed. I accused her of lying and refused to trust her until that night. "I understand. He went with him for a time, and I know he took your panties." The next day, I apologized to Emily by email. Tears welled up in my eyes as I finished talking. When you and Foster sent me to New York, I knew exactly what the trip was about. It was so you could be together. I was wondering how you managed to get Emily out of town. So it was pretty surprising when she showed up at my hotel room door on Tuesday night. I welcomed her inside, and we got a few bottles of wine from room service. We ended ourselves sitting on opposing mattresses, drinking, sobbing, and sharing stories. She stated that the private investigator had captured your phone talks while planning my vacation, before Foster could come up with an explanation for her departure. She'd previously offered to pay her mother a visit. Emily and I spent the remainder of the trip locked up in our hotel room. We only went out once to see the Empire State Building. I had never been, and Emily served as my tour guide. Believe it or not, we didn't touch the entire time. I handed her a few other images. They showed Emily and me around Denver. She also visited Denver and presented some recordings of you and your partner. They were largely the ones in which he got you to deny me closeness. That's when it struck me, why our marriage had dissolved. Emily and I ended up touching hands while drinking scotch. We were in love. We were simply two hurt souls pulled together by the actions of our relationships. We tried to fix the wounds you and Foster had caused. I lay out additional images of Emily and me from Seattle, Phoenix, and Boston. The photos show us enjoying the views. Sherry and I have talked about visiting these places before. We'd become good friends with Perks by then. I admitted. Finally, I showed the photographs from Miami. They showed Emily sunbathing in a swimsuit, looking stunning, alongside another girl. Emily is excellent friends with that other girl. Remember how I told you about my fantasy of being with two women at the same time? It turned out to be just as I had imagined. Sherry was devastated. Tears spring up in her eyes. I felt a twinge of remorse, too. If she had admitted her mistakes at any point, we might have been able to go on. If she had told me long ago that she wanted to leave our marriage to be with Foster, I would have been injured but not destroyed like this. I was sincerely sorry for the entire disaster that had risen to leave. I bid farewell to Sherry. I loved you once. With that, I walked away. By the time the verdict was given, I was completely packed. Both offenders were found guilty, and none of the stolen funds were recovered. Foster received a 7-year sentence, while Sherry received 3 years and 2 years of probation. My attorney had the authority to sell the house and its contents, so I told him to pack Sherry's belongings and put them in storage. The proceeds from the sale of the house, as well as half of our savings, were to be held in an escrow account for Sherry. By midnight, I was on a flight to France. Now I'm sitting on my veranda overlooking the Côte d'Azur. My deck overlooks the beach, which is only 3 blocks away, and where I frequently walk while sipping a fine bottle of Côte du Rhône wine. I reflect on the past year since I moved to the south of France. I have not returned to the United States or heard from Sherry since the verdict. I've become something of a recluse in my modestly sized house, which I proudly refer to as a chateau. But it is mine, and it is a haven. Emily has made a few visits, but our relationship is strictly friends with benefits. However, the benefits are enjoyable. Her friend joined us once, resulting in an equally enjoyable second encounter. Emily did well during her divorce and is ready to make some lucky bachelor happy, assuming he can get past her trust issues. She knew about my plan to exact revenge on Foster and Sherry, and she thought it was appropriate for both of them. She is content and moving on with her life, whereas I am dealing with my own issues, even though I don't have to work. With the ill-gotten gains and some legitimate income, I launched an online business writing software for system integration, which is essentially the same work I did for Clinton. I can handle it all from here. I am currently working on a few contracts. Clinton even emailed me acknowledging my efforts and offering to refer clients my way. I thanked him. The ladies at the patisserie find humor in my broken French and patiently teach me new vocabulary every day. At this rate, I might be able to master the language by the age of 100. I've somewhat recovered from Sherry's betrayal and subsequent divorce. However, I'm having more difficulty justifying my own actions. I remember a case study from a college psychology class that comes to mind. It tells the story of a husband who went missing only to be found years later. The study described how one day, this man left work early to watch the World Series game between the Oakland Athletics and the San Francisco Giants. As he was leaving his office, He was in the San Francisco Bay Area with his wife and two small children. The Loma Prieta earthquake struck. He almost died as bricks and large chunks of the building collapsed around him, narrowly missing him. This near-death experience served as a wake-up call to the man. In that moment, he recognized how fragile life was and how unhappy he had been. He realized what he intended to accomplish before dying in a swift and reckless gesture. He rushed home, packed his belongings, and left his wife and children without saying anything. About 4 years later, officials discovered him living happily with a new wife and child. He was detained and given a psychological evaluation. The psychiatrist decided that the man's extreme acts were motivated by a life-changing insight during the earthquake. His perspective on life changed radically, and he became acutely aware that it may end at any moment. Motivated by this newfound awareness, he abandoned his duty and fled. However, as time passed, he subconsciously realized that his world did not revolve around death. He gradually returned to his prior luxurious life, becoming a happy, married family guy. Maybe my experience parallels his. When I was in love and trusted those close to me, I was a nice, honest man. I followed the rules, never cheated on my taxes, or entertained thoughts of another woman. Sherry was my entire universe, and I loved her with every fiber of my being. The agony of betrayal by someone you love, however, strikes deeper than any other pain, entering your soul and clutching your heart. When my reality was broken in an instant, I became someone I didn't want to be. Now I'm faced with difficult decisions. Do I retreat deeper into my seclusion, erecting barriers around my soul to keep the darker side of me at bay? Or can I gradually allow people to reintroduce the better pieces of me into the world? I'm not sure where the answer lies, but there's a glimmer of optimism. The young blonde girl in the patisserie is so sweet. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, write a comment below with your thoughts on what transpired. Take care.